We're talking Gyökeres, we're talking Norgaard, we're talking Nwaneri, Eze, Rodrygo, Madueke, and more. Welcome to another live episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Let's get into it. Hey everybody, how are we doing? Welcome back to another live episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. Happy Tuesday to you all. Hope you've all had a wonderful start to the week. We've got a fair bit to get into, as it feels like we kind of always do at this time of year. There are lots and lots of transfer rumours floating around. There are lots of stories being reported on. There is lots of information, some of it accurate, some of it not so accurate. Some of it based on hearsay and rumors, some of it based on guesswork, I would argue. So look, there's a lot to try and sort of unpack on a daily basis at this time of year. And you've got to, I think, always try and be as level-headed and as grounded as you can possibly be, because you'll hear about things, you'll start to form and develop an opinion about things. You might even get angry and frustrated about things, and those things might not be true. So it's a very, very difficult period, I think, as a football fan to navigate. And when you care as deeply for a club as we do, and you're desperate to see that club succeed and do what, in your opinion, are the right things to get the club to where they want to be, you're going to be really, really passionate, and you're going to get ticked off by, even at times, the slightest thing. So, I found myself getting a bit like that over the last few weeks, getting a little bit frustrated, getting a little bit angry. Maybe angry is too strong a word, but you know what I'm saying. And I've tried to kind of wind that back down over the last week or so, I think. And you know, we've been linked with a number of players. There are all sorts of targets being talked about. Some of those targets divide opinion. There are lots and lots of different opinions out there online. Somebody sent me a link to a video where another content creator had completely disagreed with something I said. It's fine. It's not a problem. I don't have an issue with that. Genuinely, I don't. I've learned to kind of just stay in my lane and do my thing, and you know, people like it and some people don't, and that's fine. And I'm not going to sit here and judge what other people do, and nor am I going to take anything personally that is said about any of my opinions, because it is chat about opinions, and football is a game of opinions. So yeah, I've learned, I think, over the last little while, to kind of just stay in my lane, do my thing. I'll share my views, and the people that are here and enjoy it, great, welcome, thank you for being here. And those that don't, no problem as well. You're not going to please everybody, are you? Certainly not going to be able to do that. Look, let's say a few hellos, because there's loads and loads and loads of you in the chat this morning. We've got Alawe, we've got Owen, we've got Sniper, Colte's with us, Andy, Leeds Gunner. We've got Andy, Andrew, we've got AFC Till I Die, Gary, BR London. There's so many. Look, if I just read out names, that's all I'll be doing. So we'll leave that. But a big hello to every single one of you, and welcome to the channel on this Tuesday morning. Okay, shall we get into today's stories? Because there's a fair bit. To work our way through today. So let's kick off then with that. And I'm going to start off with something that I did last night. It was a bit of fun. I was interested in gauging the opinions of Arsenal fans. And I know that the people that follow me, or the people that tune in to this podcast, or you know, on audio, or watch it on YouTube, they don't represent all of the Arsenal fan base. But I wanted to take the fan base's temperature on a couple of bits and pieces. So that's what I did last night. I put out a couple of polls on X. The first one was this interesting question that was put to me on today's podcast. This is what I posted. Would you rather Arsenal spent huge on Rodrygo, or tried to land the combination of Eze and Madueke? So if you think about what Rodrygo is going to cost, we keep hearing the figure of around about 90 million euros, right? Which translates to probably, 80 million pounds. I know the combination of Eze and Madueke would cost more than that. It probably cost, I don't know, 120 million pounds maybe. But well, is that too much? If let's say that Crystal Palace dig their heels in and want the release clause 68, talking nearly 70, and then let's say Chelsea want 45 to 50, maybe just under 120, maybe 115 million euros, I don't know, million pounds. I don't know, whatever. Would you rather see Arsenal try to go out and get Rodrygo, or would you prefer that they try to land the combination of Eberechi Eze and Noni Madueke? Now, I've seen people saying, we'll get Rodrygo and Eze. I don't think that that's necessarily financially viable, because with Rodrygo, it's not just the huge transfer fee that you're going to pay. You're probably going to have to give him quite the wage packet as well. So that's where I think that becomes impossible or unrealistic to expect. I know that's what people want. And I know that we keep doing this thing where we're like, who cares about the money? It's not our damn money. But if we're being realistic about what the club are likely to do, they're not likely to go and pay for Rodrygo and Eberechi Eze. So would you rather Rodrygo or Eze and Madueke? And the vast majority, actually, nearly 70% of the 2,500 people that had voted by the time I screen grabbed this to share it on the podcast, the overwhelming majority want or would prefer to see us go for Eze and Madueke. 68% of you say that that would be the preferred way to go. I asked another question on Noni Madueke specifically. I said, how are people feeling about the potential signing of Madueke? And the options I gave people to vote on were excited, confused, dead against it, or happy to trust the club. Now, these results were a little bit more interesting because only 9% of the just under 2,000 people that had voted by the time I screen grabbed this, only 9% were excited about the prospect of Noni Madueke coming in. 32% of you were confused. 25%, so a quarter of those that voted, were dead against it. And 34% were happy to trust the club. I fall somewhere in between confused and happy to trust the club. I don't think that it's a deal that I would have gone after or I would have pursued if I were calling the shots at Arsenal Football Club. I don't mind it so much, again, as I've said repeatedly, if the price is right and if it's in addition to another attacking signing on top of the striker. So if you go and get Gyökeres and then you get Eze and then you bring in Madueke, I can see a way in which I can kind of be a little bit more open and positive about that. But again, as I've said repeatedly, it is very much price dependent for me. At the price that Chelsea are asking for, 50 million quid, no, doesn't make any sense. I'm probably dead against it if it's at that price. But if the price is significantly lower, then I fall in between confused, I think, and happy to trust the club. But I'd be interested to gauge you guys' thoughts in the live chat on this. So get involved. I'd love to hear from you. How are you feeling about the idea of Arsenal moving for and signing Noni Madueke? On to some more news. According to The Athletic, David Ornstein has reported this morning that Arsenal have completed the signing of Christian Norgaard, that a medical has already taken place and that signing will be announced. We're expecting this week. The deal said to be for £10 million, going up to potentially £12 million with add-ons. So very, very similar to what we paid, I think, for Jorginho. I think it was around about the £10 million mark as well. Look, I shared my thoughts on this when the links first emerged. I said that, I'm just going to get on with it now. We're bringing Christian Norgaard in. I'm going to back him. He's an Arsenal player. Let's see how he gets on. But my question marks were not so much around Christian Norgaard on an individual level, not so much about any of the players that we've lost on an individual level, but more about, is our midfield unit stronger for the fact that we've lost two very experienced midfield players, who are probably at a point in their career where maybe the decline was just around the corner. But are we better equipped now with Zubimendi and Norgaard? I think that is really dependent heavily on how quickly Martin Zubimendi adapts and sort of finds his feet in the Premier League. Christian Norgaard coming in, experienced Premier League player, a Premier League captain. I guess when you look at it from a surface level, if you sign a Premier League captain for £10 million, you probably got to be quite pleased with that. But my questions around I keep calling him Martin Norgaard because I want to go to say Martin Odegaard. Is that a connection with the names? But look, my thing with Christian Norgaard is decent player at Brentford. In fact, a good player at Brentford. Can he make that step up? That remains to be seen for me. Let's give him the chance to show everybody that he can, and we'll see how it goes. I've made my feelings on this clear in the past. I said at the time I wasn't going to bang on about it, so I'm not going to. But Christian Norgaard is an Arsenal player, and it's, according to David Ornstein, seen by Arsenal as being a very good deal at that price, seen by Brentford as being a very good deal. I don't really get that angle of it, if I'm being honest. I don't know how losing your captain for £10 million could ever be seen as a good deal, really. And also, it's said to be a good deal for the player as well, who was very, very keen to make this move, as you could understand. Okay, let's move on. Christian Mosquera is a player that Arsenal continue to be linked with. The centre-back is said to be one of Arsenal's main targets. They are looking to add a defender to their ranks. Takahiro Tomiyasu's had his contract terminated after a mutual agreement was reached. Fitness, obviously a huge issue for him. We've lost Kieran Tierney. We're probably going to lose Alexander Zinchenko, I'd imagine, between now and the end of the window as well. So it's important that Arsenal bring in a defender. Mosquera is the one they've set their sights on. It's all gone a little bit quiet, though, hasn't it, around Christian Mosquera? Now, in the Athletics transfer deal sheet published on Tuesday morning, they did say that Arsenal is still trying to sign the player. From what we've been hearing, Valencia are looking to hold out for something close to 20 million euros. If you go by the reports that we were reading coming out of Spain, Arsenal were nowhere near that in their first bid. Arsenal were around the 10 million euro mark. And so we were miles and miles away. We were 50% off, basically, where, we'd only gone 50% of the way in terms of what Valencia wanted. So, yeah, doesn't feel like, as far as we're aware, any major progress has been made on this in the last few days. But I think with Arsenal having convinced Christian Mosquera, by all accounts, that this is a great project and a great place to be for him, and Valencia being desperate for money ultimately, although they don't want to show that face necessarily in the negotiation room. I think this is one of those where if we stick to our guns, if we creep up a little bit in terms of what we're willing to pay, maybe we convince them via add-ons. I don't know. They've got to be realistic add-ons, not like the ones Tottenham put in their offer for Mohamed Kudus. If you've heard about that, that is hilarious stuff. But I think we can gradually, slowly get there with this one. So I'm not panicked or worried about it at this moment in time. Christian Mosquera to Arsenal. The talks continue. Let's talk Noni Madueke. Still no club-to-club agreement is what the Athletic are saying this morning. Now, this is interesting because a few days ago, we heard that there was no club-to-club chat whatsoever. If there's now a kind of changing of the narrative to no club-to-club agreement, well, that suggests, doesn't it, that those club-to-club talks are ongoing. Now, we've heard reports to that effect, but I don't know that they've come from anybody, just based on what I've seen, that I would look at and go, yep, you're kind of tier one, as people like to put it. So we've got to be a little bit wary of that. But there is going to be no club-to-club agreement if Chelsea do not, in my opinion, drop their valuation of Noni Madueke. If we get close to that £50 million valuation, I would go as far as saying that is crazy. And I know people will look at the amount of money that other players are going for. Brian and Mbeumo is going supposedly to Man United, and they want Brentford over 60 million to get that deal done. You look at what Anthony Elanga is going to Newcastle for from Nottingham Forest. And so you can understand why Chelsea will be sort of looking around and going, you know what? Actually, we're probably within our rights to demand that kind of money. Noni Madueke hasn't been that great at Chelsea, to the point where people are going to come in and sort of meet every single demand. Honestly, if Arsenal walk in to that negotiation room and throw down a check on the table for even close to £50 million, I'm going to seriously question that decision. I don't think it's the best use of funds. I've gone on record of saying this many, many times. I think, yes, we could do with a winger. In fact, we need a winger. And someone that could play on the right and on the left would be ideal. But Noni Madueke is far more effective on the right. And so, either you're going to convert him into a left winger, but we got traffic on that side of the pitch. Like, is Noni Madueke, the left winger, better than Martinelli or better than Trossard? Not by much, if he is at all. So he doesn't really get in there, and he's not going to play ahead of Bukayo Saka. So from Noni Madueke's perspective, I get that you'd be moving to a club that are expected going into the new season to compete at a higher level than where you're currently at. But I don't know that I would want that kind of reduction of my role. And I've said this before, and the more I think about it, the more it doesn't make sense, the more I can't get my head around it. And so for Arsenal to go and spend close to 50 million would just be a really poor use of funds, I think. We want Rodrygo. As fans, we really like that idea. That's a really exciting prospect. We like the idea of Eberechi Eze, who could play from the right side, if we were sure. Ethan Nwaneri can play from the right side. Eze could play from the left side as well. Why would we want to go and allocate a big amount of what our transfer budget is on a player that doesn't really move the needle? We've talked about what we need this summer. And in a lot of instances, I've looked at players and I've gone, you don't move the needle, so you're not the one for me. I accept that there are some positions where we don't necessarily need needle movers. That's not what we're after. We're after backups. We're after people that raise the floor. We're after people that bulk out the squad. So, for instance, Kepa Arrizabalaga at £5 million. You go, okay, well, he's not better than David Raya. We're not upgrading, but he helps us in that position. You look at Christian Norgaard, who we've just been discussing and talking about. And again, I don't think he moves the needle. I don't think he makes Arsenal a better team in terms of the first 11. I think he helps the squad. And so, yeah, there are some positions where I'll accept that because, for example, in that central midfield position, that DM position, we've brought Martin Zubimendi in, who a lot of people believe will move the needle, will be an upgrade on Thomas Partey and will take us forward. Fine. Noni Madueke, though, we need to level up in attack. It's not really that big a deal. The numbers side of it, I don't think. And when I say numbers, I don't mean finances. I mean volume of players that we have available. Because if you think about our attacking options, if we get Gyökeres in, or any other centre forward for that matter, you've got him, you've got Havertz, you've got Martinelli, you've got Trossard, you've got Saka, and you've got... did I say Nwaneri? Let me do that again. You got Martinelli, Trossard, Saka, Nwaneri, Havertz, and the new centre forward. 6 players for 3 positions. Numbers-wise, that isn't bad. Plus, you've got Mikel Merino, who can play as a makeshift centre forward if you really need him to. I'm joking. I never want to see that again. But you get what I'm saying, right? So the point is that we had a hell of a lot of injuries in that area last season. And so when we're going into the transfer market looking to add to our attack, it shouldn't be a case of, oh, well, it's just about numbers. It shouldn't be that we're obsessing over how many players we have to the point where we will compromise on the quality. It should be, how do I make this attack better? Those that are starters, your Martinellis, they can be the depth if you go out and bring in needle movers. And Noni Madueke is not a needle mover. He just isn't. He just isn't. Manny in the chat says, I'm not advocating for Noni. I'm just saying that the other options aren't amazing either. Well, that's fine. But the big problem I have with the Madueke thing, aside from the fact that I just hate giving Chelsea money and hate the fact that we keep bailing them out of these financial sort of issues that they face. I mean, they've been fined by UEFA. They need to raise, apparently, according to some reports, about 60 million quid very, very soon. And what, we're going to go and give them 50 for a player that I don't think moves the needle for us or helps us? I don't like it. I just don't like it. And I'm sorry. I have tried to make sense of it in my head. I have tried to come up with the kind of pros for this deal if it was to go through. And the only way, as I've said before, I can make this seem semi-sensible and semi-attractive in my own mind is if it's a deal that we do for 25 million quid. But that's not going to happen, is it? That's not going to happen. So I've got a firm stance on the Noni Madueke thing. I don't think it makes sense. If he signs and puts on that Arsenal shirt, of course I'm going to turn up week in, week out, and I'm going to support the guy. But it doesn't mean I have to agree with the intention of going out and signing him. It just doesn't work for me. I'm sorry. Right, look, we're going to take a really, really short pause. There's over 1,000 of you with me live right now, which is incredible on the Chronicles of a Gooner YouTube channel. Make sure that you are subscribed. Make sure you leave us a like if you haven't done so already, and not a like on the chat, a like on the video itself. That really, really does help. So please, if you could do that, I'd be super appreciative. And of course, if you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify, leave us a review. Short pause. We'll be back in just a mo.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, Harry Symeou. Like and subscribe. Just before we continue, I want to play you guys a very quick clip from our latest Patreon video, which is a scouting video on Eberechi Eze. It's available to patrons. A big thank you to all the patrons that have signed up in the last few days. If you're thinking about it, if you're on the fence, this is a quick preview of what you can get over on our Patreon page. And I've got a bit of an announcement about the Chronicles of a Gooner Patreon that I'll bring you later on in the show. Let's take a look at this. What someone like Eberechi Eze does when he's in possession is he just attracts opposition players. And because he's got the confidence and the ability to kind of lure people in before either laying it off to somebody else or making something happen himself, I think he would be key in those situations. He would be key when, you know, you're passing it from left to right. You are breaking the lines on occasions, but maybe you're not doing it quick enough, and you need somebody that is going to take that responsibility on an individual level. Look at that lovely ball clipped over the top for Ismail Assar. Here he is coming in onto that right foot. Again, wrong foot's 3 defenders in the process. This is him arriving in the box again against City in the cup final. Brilliant finish. He seems to have added that, I think, recently, the ability to kind of box crash. There you go. That's the type of content you can get over on the Chronicles of a Gooner Patreon page. The link is in the description. Check it out. Right, shall we move on to our next story? And we're going to talk Ethan Nwaneri. Now, I know there's a lot of panic out there about Ethan Nwaneri's contract situation. I know that he is adored by the vast majority of us. I know that we really do believe in Arsenal circles that Ethan Nwaneri can go on and become a real top player. We saw signs and we saw glimpses of that last season. You know, I think he got 9 goals last season, which is a really good return for a player who went into the season at 17 years of age. It's just remarkable. And you can tell by looking at him what he's all about and the brilliance that he possesses. I know that people this day and age especially are obsessed with statistics. And I quite like statistics. I quite like at times deep diving into a player, getting a feel for kind of what they're good at, where their strengths lay on the basis of statistics. And I quite enjoy identifying potential flaws in their game via statistical analysis to help me not form my opinion, but flesh out my opinion one way or the other. I don't need stats to tell me that Ethan Nwaneri is a top talent. And even if Ethan Nwaneri had scored 1 goal last season or even no goals last season, just watching the way he carries the ball, the way he glides with it, the way he cuts inside onto that left foot, his kind of willingness to adopt that shoot on sight policy. I just think he's such an exciting player. It would be such a shame if Arsenal were to lose him. There's no need to panic yet when it comes to Ethan Nwaneri. I think people within Arsenal circles and those within the club are quite confident that Ethan Nwaneri is going to sign on. Like, he wants to stay at Arsenal first and foremost. Arsenal want to keep him. They recognise what a talent he is. They recognise that he's on the right path. But as I've said before, I don't think Ethan Nwaneri is wrong to want to have some conversations about what his future is going to look like. And as I've said before, if you're being linked with the likes of Noni Madueke and even Eberechi Eze, there will be, some knock-on effect on Ethan Nwaneri if either of those 2 players was to come in. So I get why the questions are being asked, but I made this point yesterday, and I just want to make it again. I think it's really, really important to remember that the previous contract talks with Ethan Nwaneri went in a similar way. They went right down to the wire, took a bit of time, but eventually we got there because ultimately there was a desire from Ethan Nwaneri and his people to stay at Arsenal Football Club. And I still believe that to be the case. And I believe that this will move in the right direction. It's obviously horrible when you hear of this young, amazing player who's broken through and really kind of captured the imagination of so many of us being linked with rival clubs. But Chelsea are always going to be linked with talented young players because they stockpile them. That's what they do. They stockpile them. They give them 10-year contracts. And that's their model of operation at the moment. Does it work? Don't know. That remains to be seen. How are some of those players going to develop? Again, we don't know. But these links, yes, okay, Chelsea would be interested if they got wind of the fact that these negotiations had hit a brick wall or were at the point of collapse, but they're not. They're not. Ethan Nwaneri, I still believe, is going to sign a new contract with Arsenal. So I don't think there's a huge need to panic right now around this. Eberechi Eze, another player that we've been heavily linked with. We showed you the clip from the Patreon video. You can go out and go over and check that out via the link in the description below. But there is a part in the Athletics transfer deal sheet today that says that the Eze and potential Rodrygo deals, and we'll come on to that one in a minute, could be dependent on outgoings. And that is also going to be impacted by how much Arsenal end up paying for Viktor Gyökeres. So it's all interlinked, it's all intertwined, and that makes it exciting in one way, but also very fluid in another, because you just don't know how these things are going to go. Look, I've long believed and long said that with Eberechi Eze, if you play your cards right, you can get him for less than that release clause, because as I've said before, you fast forward to next summer, should he stay at Crystal Palace, he'd be going into the last year of his contract. And so for Crystal Palace, this is the last time, I think, that they can stand to make big money on Eberechi Eze. I think you can get him for around about £60 million. But I think what Arsenal are really keen on here is doing this in such a way where it doesn't tie their hands behind their backs with regards to some of the other business that they want to do. So structure is going to be really, really important to this deal. Now, Crystal Palace, they have no obligation whatsoever to compromise on a structure that suits Arsenal. Why would they care? They want the money in. They want to be able to do as they please with the money. They want to be able to go about replacing him. I think for Crystal Palace fans, it's probably not as scary losing one of your key players now as it might have been 3-4 years ago, because you've got Oliver Glasner there with a wonderful team around him who have been able to go out and buy some really talented players who have been able to really develop some of the players they already have within their ranks. So if I was a Crystal Palace fan, I wouldn't be fearful of losing Eberechi Eze. I think deep down they all know and all knew that at some point this day was going to come. But they've got no responsibility to kind of do a deal that works for Arsenal. Now, I think if Arsenal have agreed personal terms with Eze, as is being reported by some, then, Arsenal do have the advantage of being able to maybe ask Eberechi Eze to just apply a bit more pressure from his side, and that might help. It's not going to get the deal over the line, but it might push the two parties in terms of the two clubs closer together, as Viktor Gyökeres is doing. He's pulling out all the stops to try and make it happen. You kind of need a bit of that, I think, from Eberechi Eze if this is going to move forward. But I think this is one where Arsenal feel quite confident that the player wants us. They feel quite confident that there's going to be no issues convincing him. In fact, they probably believe that he's already convinced and already on board. In which case, if it takes a couple of weeks to get to the point with Crystal Palace where there is even close to an agreement, then I don't think Arsenal will be too stressed about that. I think Arsenal will see the importance of getting this deal done with the right structure. I think they'll see that as huge. And I think they'd be willing to let it drag out or let it run that little bit longer if it means they can do it in a way that benefits them. Because if it does, it also allows them to go and execute on some of the other deals that they clearly want to do this summer. Is it dependent on outgoings? Don't know. That was suggested in the transfer deal sheet over on The Athletic this morning. I suppose if you want Eze and Madueke, as we touched on earlier in the show, then maybe you do need an outgoing. If you're only going to go for one of those players, and I would much prefer that we went for Eze over Madueke, then maybe you don't need an outgoing. It's all unclear. It's all up in the air. We're speculating, but that's kind of what's being reported and what's being hinted, at least at the moment. On to Rodrygo. According to the Athletics piece, again this morning, lots of nuggets of information in that. Arsenal have held preliminary talks with Rodrygo. Now, those talks, I have to stress the word, are preliminary. There's no detail really about who those talks have taken place with. Have they taken place with Rodrygo's people? Have there been preliminary talks between Arsenal and Real Madrid? It's unclear. I don't know. But this Rodrygo stuff, man, it's not going away, is it? It's not going away. I keep bringing this up, but on our transfer rumor ratings podcast, I think we rated it as a 4 out of 10 in terms of its likelihood. Nothing's really changed for me. Has the fact that he's been repeatedly left out of the Real Madrid side at the Club World Cup, has that changed my opinion on how likely this is? Not really. It just tells me that he's not flavour of the month necessarily at the Bernabeu anymore. But again, it's going to be a very expensive deal to do. Again, it's going to be one that involves a hefty transfer fee as well as a big wage packet. And I do think that if we decide to go for Rodrygo, you're probably not going to sign Eberechi Eze as well. I can't see a world in which we sign both of them. Now, I'm not saying I'm happy with that or that I'd agree with that. And I'm starting to think that Eberechi Eze might be the better option for a lot of reasons. First of all, Rodrygo, who I was all in on, by the way, at the start of the window, is clearly not having a great time at Real Madrid. There's clearly some frustration on his part about not playing. He's like deleting social media posts around games, because obviously he's been left out of the side. I don't know. Look, I would love it, and I'm going to go all Kevin Keegan on you now. I would love it if Arsenal ended up with both Eze and Rodrygo at the end of the window. And if they did, along with Viktor Gyökeres, in terms of bolstering our attacking options, that would be, for me, the best possible outcome. The best possible outcome. Now, I know that people will argue that Alexander Isak coming in over Viktor Gyökeres might make that better. Rodrygo feels like the first choice winger for a lot of people. But we've got to talk about realistic options and realistic possibilities. And so, Rodrygo, if let's figure it out, right? Let's do a quick bit of maths. If Rodrygo was to cost, let's say best case, Arsenal got it down to 80 million euros. That'd be like, 72 million quid? Plus, let's say we got Eze, again, best possible case in my opinion, for 60 million pounds. You're talking about 132 million pounds plus the around about probably 70 million pounds we're going to pay if we get Viktor Gyökeres in, and I'm talking all in here. You're talking 202 million plus a 10 million pound spend on Norgaard, plus 5 million on Kepa, plus 15 million pounds ish on Mosquera. You're talking about a window in which Arsenal would be forking out over 230 million pounds. Can I see that happening? It's not that I don't think Arsenal can. It's not that I don't think Arsenal should. I think they should. Absolutely they should. But can I see Arsenal doing all of that without a semi-significant outgoing? If you could sell Leandro Trossard for 20 and you take 20 off that, becomes 212. If you could sell Zinchenko for 10, then you're around about the 200 million pound mark. And that feels a little bit more realistic. Feels a little bit more realistic. Fabio Vieira's been talked about as a potential sell. How much are you going to get for him? Reece Nelson, off the back of the injuries that he's had. How much are you going to get off him? I didn't even include Zubimendi in that, did I? So add another 60 million back onto that. You're talking about 260. And does the fact that Arsenal didn't spend in January help with that? Does the fact that we did it, the Zubimendi deal after the 1st of July, does that help? I don't know. But what I'm saying is that just based on recent history, I'd like to think that Arsenal can do this financially, but I wouldn't hold my breath on it, is what I'll say. So look, just to wrap up on the Rodrygo stuff, apparently preliminary talks have been held. What those talks entail, who those talks were between, I think is unclear. But it's a name that isn't going away, is it? It's just not going away. And then on to the big one, Viktor Gyökeres. What is the latest on Viktor Gyökeres? Now, this is a situation that can change by the minute, so I'm wary of that, and I'm sort of conscious of that when discussing this. But look, yesterday we heard lots of stuff to the effect of, this is done, this is agreed, this is sealed, this is wrapped up, no problem. Ornstein's not saying that. Romano's not saying that. There are some reports in Portugal that said that. There were some reports that said that Viktor Gyökeres had packed his stuff and is ready to fly over to London. There is a report that came out from Record in Portugal today that says that Sporting aren't budging on those demands of, I think, 70 million euros up front, plus 10, I think, is what they want. So I don't know how accurate that is. Apparently, he wants 70 million euros up front. You're not going to get that up front out of Arsenal, mate. But the player's made it so abundantly clear that he doesn't want to be at Sporting at the moment. Sometimes you've just got to accept that you've lost. I do think for Arsenal, like having hit a brick wall with the Sesko negotiations and then this Gyökeres stuff becoming as public as it has in the last few days, I do think there's a pressure on Arsenal now to go out and get this deal done, even if it means paying a little bit more than they'd like. But we've also been talking about the knock-on effects of paying more than you'd like for certain players and how that can affect some of our other plans. So I get why Arsenal don't want to do that. But could you imagine the meltdown if we were to fail to land Viktor Gyökeres now because we wouldn't meet Sporting's demands? It would just be crazy, wouldn't it? So there's a real pressure. The fact that this has become as public as it has in the last few days, the fact that this story has gathered as much momentum and pace as it has, doesn't put Arsenal in a great position in terms of the negotiating, because they know that they got to get this done now. Sporting know that they got to get this done, and that's why it feels like, having made a bit of progress, there are now rumbles that actually Sporting have gone, you know what, actually, we're not going to compromise. Let's get our money for the player. Yeah, this is going to be interesting, isn't it? See how it pans out over the next few days. Okay, another very, very brief pause, and then we're going to bring you up to speed with what's happening on the channel, on the podcast, before taking a bunch of your questions to wrap up. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner Pod. Okay, so as I mentioned a little bit earlier on in the show, I want to say a massive thank you to all the people that have signed up to Patreon over the last few days. There's been lots of you. I'm super grateful for the support. I cannot tell you how honored and privileged I feel that there are people that are willing to become patrons around the content that we make. It's just, yeah, it's really humbling and amazing. So thank you, first and foremost. I've been thinking long and hard about what to do for the new season on the Patreon side of things, and I haven't made any sort of definitive decisions yet. I'd love to hear from you guys. What would you like? What would you enjoy as an existing patron, or what would you come over for if you're not an existing patron? I'm interested to get feedback from you guys, not in the live chat, but in the comments of the video, because that means I can go back to them and check out what you guys are saying. Last season, we did a kind of player ratings thing in the second half of the season as an addition to the main pod. Earlier in the season, we were doing like an instant reaction thing. Cards on the table. Sometimes the instant reaction stuff for me is difficult to do, because if I'm working as a commentator or as a reporter at the game, I've got other commitments that I need to get to first, because I'm being paid to work on that game. And if I don't get those instant reaction pieces out right away, well, then they're not really instant reaction anymore, are they? So yeah, I think that's something that I kind of got to over the course of the season in my own mind as being something that was a little bit unrealistic. I've really enjoyed making the video content with video over the course of the summer, and I'd imagine that that's been quite popular, and that's contributed to the upturn in patrons signing up. So I think that's interesting. I was thinking of doing sort of video reviews of sort of 15-minute sections of some of our games over the course of the season. So if, for example, we had I will pick a 15-minute period in a game that I think was key to the outcome, and we'll analyze that in a lot of depth. We'll watch it back together. We'll talk through it. We'll analyze that. So that's one idea I have. Love to get a bit of feedback on that. Another idea I have is to make content around some of the Arsenal heroes of the past. There's a lot of listeners that are of the same age as me or that are older who have experienced and remember some of the Arsenal legends. But there's a lot of younger listeners too. Like I've got friends and colleagues that I work with, and I'm like, do you remember Robert Pires? And they're like, no, not really. I was a bit young. And I'm like, what? What? You don't remember Robert Pires in his pomp? And I feel like it would be great to make content around some of those players as well, to pay tribute to some of those players, what they contributed to Arsenal, and in turn give the opportunity to some of our younger listeners to get a real feel for what those players were like and how they made us feel at the time. Also, some stuff where we bring patrons on is what I've got in mind as well, to let you guys have your say. These are all things I've got in mind. Let me know your thoughts if any of that interests you, and if you've got any other suggestions. Okay, shall we take some of your questions? Let's do that now. Let's do that next, I think. Okay, let's take some of your thoughts and questions from the live chat. Born to be a Gooner. I mean, we've covered this already, but it says, what's going on with Nwaneri? As far as I understand, there's no reason to be concerned about Ethan Nwaneri's future. He wants to stay at Arsenal. Arsenal want him to stay. I'm pretty confident an agreement will be reached there. Mitch says, I've created an app where you predict scores and goal scorers for each Premier League game, and you earn points. I've always enjoyed your pessimistic predictions. Would you join a Chronicles of a Gooner League? Absolutely. Let's do it. Let's set it up. Is there like a code that we give to people to get them to join it? If you wouldn't mind setting that up, that'd be great. Feel free to pop me a message, DM me, and we can plug it on the channel, on the pod, and we can get as many people signed up as possible. Be great fun. Great fun. So yeah, I'm up for that. What else have we got? Android says, do we know what caused the breakdown with Sesko? Was it just Leipzig playing hardball, or was there something more? Now, I don't know for certain, but when I tried to find out a little bit more about why we were said to be at this kind of sticking point over the Benjamin Sesko deal, because you guys will remember from quite a while ago, I was saying, if the Sesko deal was as progressed as some people were saying, and if the Sesko thing was something we were adamant and dead set on, why is it rolled so deep into the summer to the point where we're about to start pre-season before there's been any notable progress as far as we're aware? And there was all these stories, wasn't there? And one of them I went quite big on, which was the idea that he wanted this release clause, or that his demands were too high. And I was never able to find out for certain if that was true. And I did constantly say, look, I don't want to paint this kid in a bad light and make him out to be this prima donna that wants a crazy release clause and a crazy salary, because I don't know for sure that that's the fact. But if that is true, if I was Arsenal Football Club, that would have put me off. But I think based on what I've been able to kind of figure out, it sounds like the problem was with RB Leipzig. Like, we know there was a problem with RB Leipzig. There might have been a problem with Benjamin Sesko, but I don't know that. Quite frankly, RB Leipzig's demands around Benjamin Sesko are ridiculous. And I do wonder what the feeling is like within the Sesko camp. Because listen, if you're his agent, a move to a big Premier League club, that's massive for him. It's huge for you as well. So why wouldn't you sort of be nudging your client in that direction? Why wouldn't you be sort of putting messages out there to try and force things along or kind of change the narrative a little bit. It's all very, very interesting to me. But, his camp were pretty much radio silent. I even got in touch with his agent, who was unwilling to give me anything, not even a hint. I mean, I did get a smiley face on the end of my message. And at the time I thought, oh, smiley face. The message was like, I'm unable to comment, smiley face. And you're looking at that and you're thinking, well, is he unable to comment because this is actually moving forward and Arsenal are progressing? Or is this a smiley face because the guy's being polite and really likes emojis? I don't know, right? But in the end, it looks like Arsenal have had to walk away from that. But again, I suspect there were probably some demands maybe from the Sesko camp that Arsenal weren't completely enamored with. But I certainly know that RB Leipzig were just demanding way too much money, and that's that. But yeah, it's going to be interesting because he signed that new contract, didn't he, with them? And that was said to be done to kind of protect them in the market when the summer came along so that they could get their money for him and all that. But has that contract allowed RB Leipzig to, really kind of raise the level in terms of what they're asking for? And has Benjamin Sesko, in doing that, in maybe trying to help RB Leipzig by ensuring that they could demand top dollar with that lengthy contract, has he almost shot himself in the foot a little bit? Because now the club have essentially priced him out of a move, I think. Carrie says, is Rodrygo a good team player? He's not happy about his position and has had problems with two managers. Is he a whining little child? Is he a good team player? I think he's shown himself to be a good team player on the pitch for Real Madrid for a long, long time. He's always been the one of their wide players that would work back, that would defend, that would do the ugly stuff, the dirty work. And he's played on that right-hand side because he acknowledges and accepts that playing in the Real Madrid attack is a privilege and an honor, and he should be grateful for that. But, there has come a point, clearly, where all is not well. I read something yesterday that Xabi Alonso believes and has been sort of suggesting that Endrick should be the right winger for the new season, which will, of course, I'm sure, disappoint Rodrygo. He's being left out of games. He's not playing. There's lots of speculation around his future. There have been rumblings of him being a little bit unhappy in the past and maybe feeling a little bit underappreciated. It's difficult, isn't it? Because when you don't understand the dynamics of the environment and the background to the situation, it's very easy to go, well, he's just a whinger. Like, think about Leandro Trossard, right? Remember Leandro Trossard at Brighton? He had a falling out. That's why we were able to get him for what we got him for. He came in, showed a great attitude at Arsenal, shown a willingness to play out of position, shown a willingness to work hard, to change and adapt his game. Because his attitude appeared bad elsewhere doesn't mean that would be the case if he was to land at Arsenal. But it's certainly something, at the very least, that you should consider. So I appreciate you bringing it up. John Daly says, who would you prefer, Rashford or Noni? Oh, my God. That's like asking me which way I prefer to be tortured. Again, not because I don't think that either of them have got any talent, just because the baggage and the pricing and the whole picture just doesn't make sense for either of those two players. Rashford's on this mega salary at Man United. How much is he going to accept that drop in? Plus, we'd have to give Man United money, and Man United desperately need money, and I don't want to be the guy to help them. I don't want us to be the guys to help them, I should say. So I've got to come out of my pocket. Noni Madueke, price is too high. Certain red flags for me around him as well, which we've discussed in previous episodes. I won't go into it again. None of them is my answer to that. None of them. Anthony says, Harry, the president of Sporting is a joke. He needs to stop playing hardball. The player wants to leave and he knows it. Hence, he's sticking to his guns. Not sure how long that will last. Look, yeah, we're reading stuff today about Sporting digging their heels in and wanting 70 million euros in a sort of guaranteed payment or whatever. But my opinion is still that Viktor Gyökeres will become an Arsenal player. So I don't think this has got to the critical stage yet where we're talking about this potentially breaking down. I don't think we need to worry about it. I think this is a president who, in his sort of desperate attempt to get the maximum for Viktor Gyökeres, is pulling one final stunt. Now, Arsenal might turn around and go, well, forget it then. And Viktor Gyökeres might go, oh my God, what are you doing? I'm not going to play for you. You're going to be stuck with me. And maybe it's a bit of a game of chicken that you need to play at this stage to get this over the line. Who knows? We'll see. Penalty Spot Sports says, hi, Harry. Why are we not securing Eze first? As Palace want more cash up front, try pay the Madueke deal in installments, maybe. Yeah, I mean, look, again, the order of which we hear of things doesn't also necessarily reflect the order in which we're trying to do business. Also, sometimes you can be in negotiations for two players. One negotiation moves faster than the other. Then sometimes you have to hit the brakes because you need to then go and get yourself to a certain point with another conversation. The order of things, I don't think is really... I think it can be important, but I don't think we as fans should read into that too much because there are factors involved that we just don't know about. Let's roll through the chat and pick out one or two more, I think, before we go. BR London says Liverpool have a great relationship with RB. Maybe he's off there next year, talking about Benjamin Sesko. Maybe. I wouldn't be surprised. If he ended up there. It feels like a good landing spot for Benjamin Sesko. Fleabeard says, if Rodrygo doesn't happen, who's your second choice? Tough question. It's not Noni Madueke. Honestly, some people have mentioned Xavi Simons. I like Xavi Simons. I don't really have another choice. Look, I appreciate when I sit there and I seemingly dump on players that I don't think are good enough. I appreciate that there'll be a lot of people out there going, well, who's the alternative then? Don't just give me a problem, give me a solution. I get that. But because of how sort of reluctant I am to kind of really commit opinion-wise to any of these players, it kind of reminds me and shows me that the market is a tough one and a difficult one. Jid says, Harry, you keep doing this. You keep letting your personal feelings cloud your judgment. You did it with Norgaard too. This is like with Raya when fans thought that Ramsdale was a better shot stopper, while the manager zeroed in on a specific attribute of distribution and playing out from the back to justify Raya's signing. You don't know what attribute Arteta is looking for to favour Madueke over Eze. Okay, fine. But this is where I'm allowed to have an opinion, as are you, as is everybody. And I've said repeatedly, I said it about Norgaard and I've said it about Madueke on today's show. If Madueke signs for Arsenal, of course I want him to do well. Of course I want him to succeed. Of course I'll be cheering him on, like I'll be cheering on everybody else in an Arsenal shirt when I go to the games next season. But that doesn't mean that I have to blindly agree with and follow every single decision that the club makes. I think generally, over the last few years, they've done a fantastic job. Generally, we're moving in the right direction. Generally, there's lots to be positive about. But there are so many aspects to the running and the operation of a football club that I'm never going to agree with every single decision taken. And if I did, you'd all be sat here accusing me of being a sheep and a puppet. So me expressing of course my personal feelings are going to cloud my judgment because it's my opinion that I'm providing you with. It's my opinion that I'm providing you with. So yeah. Bah, says Hacker in the chat. I love that. Impeccable timing. Sushio says PSG are joining the race for Rodrygo. What are your thoughts? I haven't read that yet. PSG, is he going to play? I mean, Bradley Barcola doesn't play. Is Rodrygo going to play? I don't think so. I think he'd much rather come in and be the main man at Arsenal than have to deal with trying to beat Barkala, Kvaratskhelia, and Doué to those positions, who are all wonderful, wonderful players. So, yeah. And also, just back to Jid's point, Buster says, since when is Madueke instead of or above Eze? That's a great point as well. It's a great point. That's an assumption that you've made based on, you've heard that Arsenal have agreed personal terms. We also heard some reports saying Arsenal have agreed personal terms with Eze as well. And we haven't heard anything about any bids for either player. So it feels like they're working on those two simultaneously. I don't know that you can pick out a clear priority from the very little that we know. Right, guys, I am going to leave it there. Thank you all so much for joining me on today's episode. As always, really, really appreciate the love. Really, really appreciate the support. We've got about 300 likes on the board right now. There's been over 1,000 of you with us live throughout. So if you wouldn't mind smashing that like button, I'd really, really appreciate it. Can we get up to 500 likes by the time I end the stream? That would be amazing. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Help us on the road to our next milestone. If you're listening on Apple especially, because we're slacking in that department, leave us your reviews. If you're listening on Spotify, leave us a reviews. Check us out on Patreon. There's lots of video content there around transfers, around targets that we've been heavily linked with for you to go and sink your teeth into. So if you're interested, check it out. I'll be back very, very soon with another episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner. Until then, take care of yourselves and have a wonderful day. Up the Arsenal. Goodbye.